Anybody who's missing it? Anybody who's missing it will be able to see it later. I'm gonna open today with a TikTok video that is a little bit of library love that we wanted to share. So I'm gonna start there and then we'll go right into our book presentation for today. All right. I hope everyone enjoyed the little trip to the library that we just took, featuring some of the authors that will be sharing with us today. So without further ado, we will jump right in to Kensington's really exciting list for January to June 2022. Unbelievable, we're talking about 2022 already, but here we are. I'm going to kick it off of introducing some of our books and giving us a little bit of an overview. I'm Kensington's Director of Social Media and Digital Sales, Alex Nicolaisen. Feel free to contact me after if you would like ARCs, print or digital. If there's any other questions I can answer, if there are any other books on our list that you want to chat about, you can definitely reach out to me and I will be happy to talk through any of them. We're really lucky to be joined today by many of our authors that are featured in this presentation, bestsellers and authors who've received tons of acclaim, and there's so much excitement about their upcoming books. We also have editor Essie Soka with us today, as well as publicist extraordinaire Jane Nutter. So I will jump right in with the first book that we're going to talk about, and that is 20 Years Later by Charlie Donnelly. You may be familiar with Charlie already from his books like Some Choose Darkness and The Suicide House and Don't Believe It. Charlie writes a really edge of your seat, beautifully written, if you can say that about a thriller book. Charlie just has an amazing voice in his writing, and he takes that talent of having such a lyrical voice and makes it into a really scary kind of plot. So what I always say about Charlie is that if you pick up one of his books and you read it, you will want to come back for more. You'll want to share it with other people. And this book is certainly no exception. We're really excited to bring this for the start of 2022. It will be on sale December 29th. Charlie is already a #1 international bestseller. So he has tons of fans around the world, tons of accolades, and we're really excited to have this chance to bring a new book out there and give people a chance to read more of Charlie's really frightening stories. Then we have A Letter to Three Witches by Elizabeth Bass. This is part of a bit of a sub program in our rom-com program, and that is romantic comedies with magic. Everybody knows the Ex-Hex and Payback's a Witch that are, really bestsellers right now, and everybody's loving them. So we are kind of working with that trend, and we have Serena de Wilde with some of her really fun and exciting books featuring magic. And now we have Elizabeth Bass starting a trilogy with A Letter to Three Witches. This is Bewitched meets practical magic. It's fun, it's quirky, it's humorous. It's what everyone's looking for in a rom-com, but with a little bit of extra flair. And then Joanne Fluke is back with the next book in her Hannah Swenson series, Caramel Pecan Roll Murder. There's no doubt that Joanne is the biggest author writing cozies now. She is a big New York Times bestseller. She's had numerous Hallmark movies made around this series, starring Alison Sweeney, who is a huge star in the Hallmark world, as well as from Days of Our Lives, for those of us who watch Days of Our Lives. No shame there. These are really fun, funny, cozy mysteries. They're a great place to start if you haven't read cozy mysteries before. It's a really long-running series, so once you get in there, there are a lot of books to pick up. Of course, if you haven't read them before, you can start anywhere in the series. They all work together. This is the 28th book in the series, and they just keep getting bigger and better. As mentioned, they have had several television movies made for Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, and there are more on the way. So really exciting. A return to more Hallmark movies for Hannah Swenson and Joanne Fluke. Then we have Blue Fire by John Gilltrap. This is the second book in his Victoria Emerson thriller series. This is something a little bit different than what he does in his Jonathan Graves series. Those are action-packed political thrillers, and these are a little bit more of kind of a post-apocalyptic, exciting, day after tomorrow kind of feel. And what makes them exciting too is that it's not a hero, it's a heroine who is out there saving the day, taking on these different factions, and trying to rebuild the government after a devastating tragedy has kind of upended everything as we know it. John Gilltrap's a New York Times bestseller. He is extremely well connected. He attends all the conferences and conventions when, of course, we can attend conferences and conventions. He is the author that other authors come to when they have questions about weapons and explosives and the real kind of meat of what goes on in the thriller, to make it realistic. He is the expert. And this is just a really exciting series, and it's really exciting for me to have two John Gilltrap series to work on every year. So that will be really a really great follow-up to Crimson Phoenix, which released this past March. And then another huge best-selling thriller author, Lisa Jackson, is headlining Afraid, which is an anthology of 3 connected suspense stories, also featuring New York Times bestselling author Alexandra Ivy, as well as Lisa Childs. All of these stories connect around a private school in Austria, though they do take place in the United States. These are all new stories, very exciting. A really striking package here, which I think will also resonate with thriller fans. And of course, the Lisa Jackson name will bring in, of course, her fans and be a great way to kick off these authors' releases, which will be forthcoming later on in 2022. And then we have Bone Deep. This is a really exciting true crime story. Takes place, it's going to be a hardcover release, and what's making this even a bigger release is the fact that it is the true story behind the upcoming NBC miniseries, The Thing About Pam. So for those who are familiar with the case or who watch the miniseries, this is the book they can come to get, that real story, the real behind the scenes story. Joel Schwartz plays a main role in the miniseries because he is the defense attorney of the husband who was wrongly accused. He is also the co-author of the book. So there will be a lot of real true to life detail that he provides in the book that would not otherwise be available from the dramatized version. So there will be a lot of discussion and coverage around this case that will coincide with when the book is out there. So now, luckily, no one has to listen to me talk for a little while because I'm going to turn the floor over to the people that everyone really wants to hear from, and that is the authors, starting with Lorena Hughes, author of The Spanish Daughter.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay. So my name is Lorena Hughes. I am the author of The Spanish Daughter. I have a copy here. And it is a historical novel set in 1920s Ecuador, outside a town called Vinces, which is known as Little Paris, or as we say in Spanish, Paris Chiquito. And the reason for this nickname is that in the late 19th century, a group of French entrepreneurs went to Ecuador, bought land in that region, and they produced cacao beans for exportation and make the Ecuador the top exporting country of the world for a decade. My protagonist is a Spanish chocolatier in Sevilla who, after World War I, receives news that her father has died in Ecuador and has left her some kind of inheritance there. Now, she's obviously devastated with the news of her father's death, but because she hasn't seen him in 25 years, and when she was 2 years old. But she's also super excited to go to Ecuador because she's always been curious about the place where her father has been all this time. So she drags her husband across the Atlantic, and aboard the ship, someone tries to murder her and ends up killing her husband instead. So now you have to remember, this is 1920. She is terrified, doesn't know what to expect of a trip to South America or what dangers await, who's trying to kill her. And she frankly feels very vulnerable as a woman. So her solution to her problem is to dress up as a man and continue with her trip. Now, when she arrives to this Paris in the tropics, she meets half siblings that she didn't even know existed. And she introduces herself as her husband, Cristobal, because it is Purificación, Puri is her name, Puri and Puri alone, who inherits the majority of her father's plantation. So her plan is to stay for a little bit until she figures out which one of her siblings hired a mercenary to kill her. As a man, Puri goes through things that a woman of her times would never experience. She goes to bars and gets drunk. She rides horses. She visits prostitutes. But she will also meet a man who awakens a passion in her that she doesn't know what to do with, especially because this man is one of the suspects in her husband's murder. As she navigates this world, she'll figure out dark secrets from both her father and her siblings until she figures out the truth and learns some important lessons along the way. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope you have a chance to read my book, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to turn it over to Essie, who's going to talk about a couple of her upcoming books as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Essie Soka. I'm an editor here at Kensington. I'm very excited to talk to you about a few books. First up, the aforementioned Serrano de Wilde. I don't get to use the word aforementioned very often, so this is already very exciting for me. And her latest book in the Fairy Godmother series, It Happened One Midnight. So Serrana's Fairy Godmother series is one of these magical rom-coms Alex was talking about before. The setup for this series is that it takes place in the magical town of Ever After, Missouri, which runs on magic, and that magic runs on love. And the local fairy godmothers, Petunia, Jonquil, and Bluebonnet, realize that there hasn't been enough love in town and the magic is sort of waning. So they get to matchmaking. And in this particular book, one of their actual granddaughters, Juniper, is coming to town to attend a wedding. And so they're like, this is a perfect opportunity. Now, Juniper is well acquainted with their matchmaking ways. And so she does the only logical thing. She lies and says that she and her longtime best friend, Tomas, have finally realized they were meant for each other and they are now engaged. And everyone is thrilled. Tomas's mother even gives him this beautiful family heirloom ring, which supposedly is magical, has little magic itself, and they take off forever after. Juniper is a romance novelist. Tomas is a divorce attorney. So they don't exactly see eye to eye when it comes to matters of love, but it might just be that they have stumbled upon the correct answer after all. It's such a fun book. This series is so delightful. I'm also very happy to say that all 3 books in the series, Fairy Godmothers Inc., Men Are Frogs, and It Happened One Midnight, all received star reviews from Publishers Weekly, which was such a thrill. They are heartwarming and fun and smart and sexy. And if you want a little escape, I think that this is exactly the right book for you. While I plug in my computer. Next up, 2 books that couldn't be more different than what I just described. First up is 19 Yellow Moon Road by Fern Michaels. This is the latest in her long-running and very popular sisterhood series. In this particular book, you have a young woman, a friend of an associate of the sisterhood, who has gone through a lot of changes in her life, and she's sort of taking herself to this retreat to recover and think and just figure out what she wants to do with her life. And while there, she gets news that her mother has been injured and she just wants to go home for a few days and check on her. But at the airport, she's actually prevented from leaving by some of the security guards from the retreat, and they bring her back. And they sort of give her an elevated role working there that also keeps her confined to the compound. What they don't know is that in her regular life, she's a journalist. So she leaves a message for a friend of hers. And it's just like, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. And that's the last this friend hears from her. So of course, she leans on the sisterhood. They come into town and they're going to try to figure out what's going on at this retreat run by these twin brothers whose father went to prison for sort of a Bernie Madoff style scheme. And they're just not sure, are they grifters? Is this a scam? What is really going on here? But of course, the sisterhood will never allow injustice to stand. And so they get to the bottom of it. And it turns out to be even darker secrets than they expected. Anyone who's read the sisterhood series knows that they're all about, truth, justice, and the empowerment of women. And one of the things that I think is really great about 19 Yellow Moon Road is the way you come into this is a little bit outside the sisterhood. So if you haven't read any of the books in the series yet, this is a really great one to start with, because you can really learn all about them and what they do without feeling like you've sort of missed out on what's come before. Also coming out next year as a standalone novel from Fern Michaels, Fear Thy Neighbor. In this particular book, which I have to say, I really love this cover. It's one of my favorites that we've done for her. We have a young woman who has led a sort of nomadic life. She just sort of drifts from job to job, place to place, and she's finally deciding she wants to settle down. She happens to drive through this sort of island town off the coast, and she sees all these cute cottages and just thinks, maybe this is the place for me. So on a whim, she buys a place, she needs to fix it up, and she's just like, this is where I'm gonna live, this is where I'm gonna make my new start. That night, before things settle down, she has a very strange encounter at the motel she's staying at in town, where she just sort of loses time. Things in her room are not where she left them. And she just kind of convinces herself she's been driving a long time and maybe I'm just imagining things. She gets to her new home, she's moving in, she's clearing out the garden, and she finds a set of bones. So the police come in and everyone's trying to figure out who this is and what has happened. And she comes to find out that many years before, another set of bones was found on that property. And that really kicks the story off. As secrets in this town come out, whispers of missing children, of possible cults start to come in, and Allison realizes she has no idea what she's gotten herself into. So there is tons of suspense, tons of mystery, and at the core, this woman who is caught up in a world that she could never have expected and really can only rely on herself to get her out of it. So if you're looking for a suspenseful, thrilling book, this one is definitely for you. Empty Vows is the second book from Mary Monroe featuring the Wiggins family. In the first book, Mrs. Wiggins, we met Maggie and her husband, Hubert. Maggie is a woman on a mission. She wants to be happy, she wants to be respected, and she finds that there are ways of removing people from her life who perhaps are getting in the way of her happiness. In this second book, Maggie is sadly no longer with us, and Hubert, as a successful and well-respected widower in town, has all these women vying for his attention, vying to become the next Mrs. Wiggins. Top of that list is Jessie, who was the first Mrs. Wiggins's best friend, and she has always been jealous of their marriage and jealous of the happiness that her friend described when she had been in such a difficult marriage herself. So she is determined to be the next one on Hubert's list. But Hubert has secrets of his own that Jessie doesn't know about. And the two of them coming together lead to both of their downfalls. So this is a very juicy, scandalous 1930s set, Deep South novel about people sort of doing whatever it takes to get by. Mary Monroe is one of the classic novelists of African-American literature. So many of her books are long beloved, and this new series has so much drama and angst and action that you just get caught up immediately, and you sort of can't believe that you find yourself rooting for these people with some of the things that they're doing. And it's just a ton of fun. So Mrs. Wiggins is out now, and hopefully you will also enjoy Empty Vows.
Thank you so much, Essie. You absolutely killed that. So thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us about those books. Now we're going to turn it back over to one of our amazing authors who has received so much acclaim over the course of her books, starting with The Education of Dixie Dupree, author Donna Everhart.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right, well, I'm going to go against the grain here and try to talk a little fast for a Southerner. So my fifth book is The Saints of Swallow Hill. And in this story, I have sort of stepped away from the genre that I was writing in, which is still Southern fiction, but I was writing coming of age stories. And in this particular case, this is not a coming of age story. I have written a book with characters who are adults, and it's third person point of view, which is also a step away from my other stories. But I think aside from the fact that I write Southern fiction and have always written Southern fiction, they're considered historical novels, and this one in particular, it takes place during the Depression era. And I don't really want to give you a history lesson per se, but I do feel like it's important that I tell you about the backdrop or the setting where this takes place, because I find that I was amazed when I started doing research on the Depression era, because it led me to Zora Neale Hurston's work, Mules and Men, which is about turpentine down in Florida. And then I began to do a little bit more research about these turpentine camps, and I ran across a term called navel stores. And navel stores is actually just a term for the extraction of pine resin from the longleaf pine tree. And that in turn is turned into tar, pitch, and turpentine. And that was used to waterproof the wooden sail ships. But even as that industry waned, which North Carolina, where I am from, was a top producer of the naval stores, even after it waned, these turpentine camps had sprung up all over the South. And anyway, the bottom line is the more I dug into it and the more research I did, I realized that this would be the perfect setting because it's a brutal environment. It's physically challenging. It was physically challenging for these individuals, both well, physical and emotional challenges. And I realized that's the kind of story that I like to put my characters into, or the kind of setting that I like to put my characters into. And so it's written from, the story's written from two different perspectives, that of Delwood Reese and Raylyn Cobb. And when we meet Del Reese, he is down in Georgia. He's not working on the turpentine farm yet. He is working on a farm for a man named Mo Sutton. And he ends up having a life-altering event while working on that farm, because he gets on the wrong side of Mo Sutton by becoming just a little bit too friendly with Mo Sutton's wife. And so the man sends him to work in a grain bin, and Del experiences this life-altering event. And he also realizes once he comes out on the other side of it, that he cannot stay there and continue to work because Mo Sutton has it in for him. And so he takes off for, he's heard about the turpentine camp named Swallow Hill, and so that's where he heads. And in the meantime, Raylyn Cobb, my other main character, is up in North Carolina, and she's working on a small turpentine farm with her husband of 7 years, Warren Cobb. And Warren has a propensity for being a little bit reckless and careless and hazardous to be around. And unfortunately, through his own recklessness, he suffers a catastrophic injury. And Raylyn is forced to commit an act of mercy. And in doing so, she is caught by their friend, Butch Crandall. And Butch Crandall's always had a little bit of a thing for Raylyn, so he decides to blackmail her. And Raylyn realizes that she can either agree to what he suggests or she will go to jail. So she decides, similar to Lorena Hughes' story, where her main character dresses as a man and disguises herself as a man, Raylyn ends up doing the same thing. And she has heard of the turpentine camp named Swallow Hill, believe it or not, through Butch Crandall. And so that's where she ends up heading. And once these two characters are in this turpentine camp together, this is sort of the catalyst for where this story takes off. They will encounter many other characters. They will form friendships. And ultimately, this is not only a story of survival, it's a story of resiliency, of courage, and hope. And I hope that's enough to entice you to want to read it. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Donna. Now we're going to turn it over to New York Times bestselling author Rebecca Zanetti, who is bringing us a brand new series, really exciting, suspenseful book that's really ratcheting up the suspense even more than her Deep Ops series did. I'm sure her many fans are going to love it, but I don't want to take up her time, so I will turn this over to her now.
So hi, I'm Rebecca. Thank you so much for letting us do this. As a kid who grew up in the library, this is actually really exciting for me. This new series is a thriller series, and the lead is a woman named Laurel Snow, who is, she was a child prodigy. So she went to college at 11, and she's a little awkward because, you know, her brain is 10 steps away from what's happening right now. But she's really good at her job, and her uncle is accused of being a serial killer back in her small hometown. And so she goes home to try to figure out if it's true or what's happening. And so, you know, she's working with a group of teenagers and people who, you know, they're not the most sophisticated, but it's a fun group who really tries hard to solve this horrible mystery. And the romantic interest is a pretty cool guy named Huck Rivers, who is named after their dog. And he's the head of the Carlene dog program, which is something we have in Washington State, which basically is a way to protect both bears and people from each other. And so he that's his main job, but he's also a tracker and a diver from ex-military. And as long as you leave him alone and let him live in his cabin, he's willing to help everybody. But other than that, he's pretty cranky. So the two of them on the surface don't look like they can mix, but there's some pretty fun scenes between them. And it's going to be a slow burn. But the reason this book was just driving me crazy so I could write it, and the characters were in my head, because there's a woman named Dr. Abigail Kane, who's also brilliant, and she's definitely a sociopath. And it's a big reveal in the book, but it's on your key selling point here. So these women turn out to be half sisters. And so the question is, what happens when a sociopath loves you? And a lot of people think that sociopaths can't love, but they can, and they do very deeply. It's just not in the way that we would. So when this relationship comes to light, it does two really interesting things. It puts everybody Laurel loves in a safer category because Abigail wants to help her, but also it puts them in extreme danger because nothing and nobody can get between what Abigail wants, which is this relationship with her sister. So the push-pull between these two women, I think, are what going to drive the series while trying to solve mysteries and thrillers on the side. It's a little bit like Luther and Alice Morgan, if you've seen that show, without any of the romance. So I had tons of fun writing it and trying to figure out these intricate, really smart, intelligent people who just don't know how to deal with other people very well. So Christine Feehan and Lisa Jackson were both kind enough to read the book and gave great blurbs, and they enjoyed it. And I just found out that we received a starred review from Publishers Weekly, which is always exciting, and especially for a brand new book in a new series. So I am really excited about this book and the psychological fun I had with it. I hope you get a chance to read it. I hope you like it. And if you do, please, drop me a line through my website, and I'd love to know what you think. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was wonderful. And yeah, I have been giving away the reveal in every one of my presentations. So anyone who has heard me talk about this book now knows what is going to happen, but I'm sure they will still have all the excitement and edge of your seat experience that I would expect from one of your suspense books. So now I'm going to turn this over to Jane, who's graciously stepping in for Alicia Condon, who was unable to be with us today. Jane is going to take us through a couple of upcoming romance titles that we are really excited to publish, and that features some just really fantastic big authors that I think you'll recognize.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane. I'm a communications manager here at Kensington. So the first book that I'll be talking about is Calder Grit by Janet Daly. This is the second book in the Calder brand series, which was itself a spin-off of Janet's iconic Calder series. So in this book, which is really fun, it's kind of like Oklahoma meets Legends of the Fall with a Romeo and Juliet love story. So, excuse me. So this book, from the first book, Calder brand, which came out this past March, there's a little bit of a time jump. So we had Joe Dollarhide and the Calders sort of having their kerfuffle and, reuniting in Calder brand. And now with Calder Grit, we're fast forwarding into the next generation. So their children. This takes place in 1909 in the town of Blue Moon in Montana. This book is deals with a lot of issues. So when I say Oklahoma the musical, I mean like the farmer and the cowman can't be friends kind of situation, because you had originally the ranchers, they were the top dogs in the area. They owned all the land, they ran the show, but then, with westward expansion, you started to see immigrants coming over from Europe, and then as they move westward, they start butting heads with these ranchers because they're farmers and they want land to grow crops and settle down and grow roots. So you have this tension in there. So then in the, when one of the sons of the ranchers falls in love with one of the daughters of the farmers, there's sort of a Romeo and Juliet love story, Hatfields and McCoys kind of thing. So it's a really fun book. This is very deeply researched. It's very of the place of the Old West of the time when the frontier was still uncertain, when you needed to, you know, really self-sustain and like really strong personalities. And it's really classic Janet. I mean, Janet is the, you know, America's first lady of romance. She's an iconic author. And this is really, I think, one of her strongest series that she's had in the recent past. So, you know, it's in hardcover. It's perfect for people who are looking for Yellowstone-esque reads. You know, Yellowstone is the most popular show on TV right now. While yes, it's historical and not contemporary the way that Yellowstone is having their own historical spinoff, which is coming out in December. So I think people are really going to be looking for reads about ranchers and family sagas, and that's absolutely perfect for those readers. And now we have In Bloom, which is a wonderful anthology headlined by Fern Michaels. As Essie was talking about Fern earlier, I mean, she's just, I mean, almost needs no introduction. She's just a fabulous author. And then here she is paired with Carolyn Brown and Laurie Foster, who themselves are mega bestselling authors as well. So they have three fandoms coming together. This book is definitely going to be in demand. And this anthology revolves around Mother's Day. So all the novellas take place around Mother's Day. It involves relationships between mothers and daughters coming home, the importance of family. There's also some fun like childhood sweetheart romance in there and some second chance at love romance, which are fan favorite tropes. And this is very sweet, very uplifting. And I think it's great to have like sort of another holiday-esque type of read. So it's not Christmas, it's not Halloween, you know, so this is an evergreen springtime Mother's Day read that is actually really good also for mothers and teenage daughters that want to do like a buddy read book club type thing, because this book will be appropriate for like older teens as well, not just adults. So I think this is a really great addition to sort of the new holiday camp anthology.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for that last minute jump in on that. I really appreciate it. From there, we're going to move on to Carlene O'Connor, who writes the Irish Village mystery series. These are really exciting, fun, cozy mysteries with, of course, an Irish setting, which readers just adore. So it's something a little bit different for the cozy scene in that it takes place outside the United States, but you still have all of those wonderful cozy elements that mystery readers enjoy so much, and that kind of Irish, British setting that is so big right now with BritBox and you know, all the British mystery TV shows. So without further ado, Carlene.
Hello, and I first have to say that my maternal grandmother was a librarian, so there's tons of library love in my family as well. So I'm thrilled to be here. This is the 8th installment of the Irish Village Mysteries, and it's a special one because it opens with a long-awaited wedding of my main character, Siobhan O'Sullivan, to Detective Sergeant McDara Flannery. But like often happens in Siobhan's world, there is a bit of chaos going on at the opening, which is that her oldest brother, James, is missing, or they don't know that he's missing, but he's not at the wedding. And that's, of course, where he is expected to be. And they're debating what to do, whether or not to go through with the nuptials, when the church doors are thrown open and James enters. But instead of being dressed in his tux for the wedding, he's covered in dirt and looks absolutely stricken. And it turns out he was helping to restore an old Irish farmhouse, and it's an abandoned dairy barn with an old decommissioned slurry pit. But as he was cleaning debris out of the slurry pit, he found a skeleton. So this is what brings Siobhan and McDara to this abandoned dairy farm. But there's kind of a second surprise for Siobhan right away, which is the fact that they actually own this farm. McDara has bought it as a surprise for his wife, whether they want to move into it together or whether they want to resell it. He thought it would be a great investment. Of course, that's before he knew about the skeleton in the slurry pit. And so as they're starting to talk about how long these bones might have been there and what could be going on, a neighbor from the farm nearby pops in, and she's an elderly woman who swears that the remains must be her fiance, that she was slated to marry 50 years ago to the exact day. Well, that is a big coincidence, and Siobhan O'Sullivan does not like coincidences. And so she figures there has to be a reason why their nuptials were interrupted 50 years ago to the day that another groom-to-be went missing. He was presumed missing at the time, and now they've finally found where he landed up in this slurry pit. And then, of course, to complicate matters, the next day, a new body will drop in the slurry pit, and everyone will have to try to figure out exactly what is going on here. Not only will it take place on this abandoned dairy farm, there'll be the ancient art of falconry and the hobby of pottery. It's always fun to kind of add something new to each cozy mystery. And then the last thing I'll say is that Siobhan comes from a big family, a big brood. And to me, this is a special installment, not just because of the marriage, but because a lot of really cool changes are coming to the entire O'Sullivan brood that readers will discover by the end of the book. And that's me, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and talking about the new book in the series. And spoiler alert, there will be another new series coming from Carlene later in 2022, also featuring an Irish setting. Now I'm going to turn it over to Edwin Hill, who you may remember from his Hester Thursby series, which actually featured a librarian as the main character. So Edwin obviously has a lot of library love, and he's going to talk to us about his new standalone suspense novel, The Secrets We Share.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks for having me today. Just like Carlene, I also have some grandparent librarians in my family. My grandmother was the town librarian in the town where my parents grew up. And I brought a lot of that into the series. But this time around, I wrote a standalone book. And I hope you don't mind if you could indulge me. I'm going to tell a little bit of a personal story, because I think like a lot of authors, we're always looking for ideas, and sometimes we find ideas in kind of the tiniest little things that happen, and we kind of spin them up into a new idea. So when I was a kid, I had a friend named Brooke who grew up next door, and we kind of did everything together for years and years and years. And her mother was sort of like the cool mother. She was the mother that you could talk to, and you could tell secrets to and stuff like that. So as we were getting toward the end of high school, one day Brooke showed up with a pack of cigarettes and said, "Let's have one." And so we snuck outside of her window, and we were just opening up the pack of cigarettes to pass them out when her mother appeared out of nowhere and sort of gave us the business. And I got sent home, and she got in trouble, yada, yada, yada. And then there were a couple of little things that happened where the two of us wound up kind of distance. There was a little distance between us after that, and we just kind of fell out with each other. And I didn't see her for about 30 years. And when I saw her again after 30 years, I brought up the cigarette thing, which had always sort of stuck in the back of my mind. And she could not stop laughing, because it turned out that her mother and she used to smoke together all the time. And I had no idea that they used to smoke together all the time. She sort of had this other sort of bad girl side. And her mother had actually been pissed off because she thought that my parents might find out that she had stolen the cigarettes from her. So this tiny little secret that we had between the two of us, where we both had interpreted that information completely differently, had sort of driven this wedge between us that lasted for many decades. And now we're back in touch, which is awesome. So that's the kind of story that you take as an author, and you kind of blow it up and you make it a little bit different, or very different, so that you have a novel out of this. So when I was starting this novel, that thing happened to me, and I thought, well, what can I do with this to make it into something a little bit more mystery-like? So first of all, I had to add a dead body. It had to be about something more than just a cigarette. So what I did was the secrets we share is at the heart of it, there's a secret. There's the secret that festers, just like the one that I just told you about. But in this novel, which is about two sisters, one of them is named Natalie Kavanaugh, and she's a tough as nails Boston detective. And she has a sister named Glenn, who's a food blogger and a cookbook author. And when they were teenagers, they found their father bludgeoned to death in the woods behind their house. See, so I raised the stakes just a little bit. And the thing about it is that each of them believes secretly that they know what happened to their father, but they don't share that information with each other. They kind of sit on that information for all these years. Except in the present day, there is a new murder that ensnares both of them. And as the story unfolds, they're forced to confront that truth. I don't want to say a ton more about it, but I will say this. I wrote this so that there'd be a surprise in every single chapter. There are 46 chapters, so there are at least 46 surprises, and I hope you enjoy all of them. If you have readers who really like Sherry Lapina, you can see that right here, or Riley Sager, people who like those kind of books that have a surprise in every single chapter, they're gonna like this book. A lot of people have asked me why I'm writing a standalone after writing the Hester Thursby series. And, it was really, I have to tell you, it was really exciting to write a standalone for the first time. With a series, you really have to protect your main characters, obviously. Readers would be pretty angry if I killed off Hester Thursby at this point. But with a standalone, one of the fun things that you can do is anyone can be good, anyone can be bad. There can be anyone can surprise you in any way. And so Peter Swanson, who's an author who I really admire, he wrote a book called The Kind Worth Killing and a lot of other novels that I really like. He was kind enough to read this book, and he said it really best. He said it really well. He said, this is full of whiplash twists and dark family secrets. Be advised not to trust anyone. And I'll leave you with this one final thought. Don't you love the cover of this book? Kensington does an amazing job with their covers. And one of the exciting things about this book is that we do have printed arcs. And the exciting thing about the arcs is that they have a different cover. So I would love for you to have an arc because they're going to be collector's items. Last thing to say is thank you all for coming today. Please be in touch. I love to hear from readers and librarians. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And I have one of those arcs, I believe right behind me. Yeah, right here. So it's near the top of the reading pile. Now that I know there are 46 surprises in there, I think it's going to be the next read. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think a lot of people are really going to be looking forward to it. And thank you so much for coming and sharing this behind the scenes story with us today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Alan Ladd for his book, A Light Beyond the Trenches. You might remember his books, Long Flight Home and Churchill's Secret Messenger, both set in World War II. In this book, Alan Ladd has turned his attention from World War II to World War I. And speaking of covers that we love, I absolutely adore this one. And I feel the need to point out the Zeppelin in every single time I talk about this book because it's just so cool.
Well, thanks, Alex. Hello, I'm Alan Ladd, author of A Light Beyond the Trenches, a novel inspired by the world's first guide dog training school for the blind that was established in Oldenburg, Germany during World War I. Anna Zeller, whose fiance Bruno is fighting on the Western Front, works as a nurse at a hospital in Oldenburg. During a visit from Dr. Stalling, the director of the Red Cross Aimless Dogs Association, she witnesses a spark of hope when the doctor's dog guides a blind patient over a garden path. It inspires Dr. Stalling to begin training dogs as companions for sightless veterans, and Anna convinces him to let her work at the guide dog school where she meets Nia, a German shepherd with trench-damaged paws. And with Nia's help, Anna begins a quest to show Max, a Jewish pianist who was blinded on the battlefield, that life is worth living. In 1916, thousands of soldiers, many of whom were blinded by poison gas, were returning home from the front. In Germany, blind veterans were viewed as 100% disabled, but guide dogs provided them with emotional support and a chance at an independent life. The Oldenburg School soon expanded and opened branches across Germany and trained up to 600 dogs per year. It was a privilege to research the origin of guide dogs. And in writing the book, it was my endeavor to honor the German shepherds and their instructors who were the genesis for the training of service dogs around the world. The book is also based on the use of poison weapons by German and Allied forces. Many real historic figures appear in the story, including Fritz Haber, the father of chemical warfare. During World War I, there were an estimated 1.2 million poison gas casualties. And it is my hope that this story will commemorate their service and sacrifice. A Light Beyond the Trenches is essentially the intersecting stories of three people, Anna, Max, and Bruno. Their journeys will transport readers to the muddy trenches on the Western Front and the guide dog grounds in Oldenburg. But most of all, their stories will show us the lengths we will go to find light in the darkest of times. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us that background and talking us through the story a bit. It's another one that I have actually a copy headed to me from the warehouse currently. I'm really excited. It's definitely seems like a very emotional story. I have a difficulty reading books with animals in them because I just feel like, oh my God, what if something happens to this animal? But I will see. And if something happens to the animal, you may get an email from me. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dennys Price, who I'm sure you'll remember from Wild Women and the Blues. Her first book with Kensington, which came out earlier this year, had an absolutely stunning cover, got every possible accolade you can imagine. It was just a fantastic debut, and I'm really excited that she's here today to talk to us about her new book, which will be coming in 2022.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennys Price, and as Alex said, I'm the author of Wild Women and the Blues, and now my second novel, In the Face of the Sun. I always like to start talking about this story in terms of inspirations. And the inspiration actually happened because of my love of travel and hotels. And I was hanging out in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, well, 3 years ago, attending the Los Angeles Film Festival because I am also a film nut. And I stayed at a place called the Culver Hotel in Culver City. And the Culver Hotel is I think was built in 1925 or 1920. And it's maintains or retains a lot of that history from that time period. And I'm a fan of the 1920s. Well, while I was diving through that particular hotel's history, I learned about another hotel. A hotel also in Los Angeles called the Hotel Somerville that opened in 1928. What made it particularly fascinating for me was that it was the first luxury hotel built in Los Angeles that was exclusive to African Americans only. It was built by African Americans, paid for by African Americans, and what also added to its luxury status was the fact that no other hotel in Los Angeles allowed Blacks to come in and be there. So I was just fascinated by this hotel and actually went to visit it on Central Avenue, and then just dove into the history of that time period because it connected two of my passions. Classic Black Hollywood, film, okay, I'm going to say three, and location. And then 1968 just felt, as I started working through the more intimate side of the story, because history, it's definitely historical fiction, but it's also a story about family. It's a story about sisters. It's a story about secrets. And it also has a nice mystery that has to be solved. It's told in a dual timeline, one of my favorite story structure things to play with. And in the opening of the story, you're in 1968, and a young woman by the name of Francine Saunders is leaving home because of an abusive husband. She wants to get away, and she's tried before, but this time she's going to get it done. And she happens to have run into an aunt that she doesn't have a really close relationship with, because no one has talked to her Aunt Daisy in 40 years because of a disagreement, or, as you will learn reading, those who read the story, something happens in 1928 that keeps the two sisters from speaking to each other. But nonetheless, that's her ride. That ends up being her ride. So we have a road trip, Route 66, back in the 60s, and 1968, and that whole storyline takes place primarily over the first week and a half in June of 1968. And some of the key happenings historically during that time period do come into play. The civil rights movement, the assassination in April of that year of Dr. Martin Luther King, the death and assassination of Robert F. Kennedy on the first week in June. And my characters are traveling in 68 from Chicago to Los Angeles with purpose. Back in 1928, the grand opening of the Hotel Somerville, where my main character, Daisy Washington, is a chambermaid at the hotel, kicks off a week before the first meeting of the NAACP on the West Coast occurs at the same hotel. So we have history happening with historical figures making appearances that include W.E.B. Du Bois, a laundry list of really interesting people from history, but also how they interact with my main fictional characters. Pretty important as well. We were talking about librarians, and my 1968 character works at a library part-time, and it's Vivian G. Harsh, who was she was the first Black librarian in Chicago, and that library actually has played a part in each of my books. And when I was listening to some of the other authors talk, I said, oh my goodness, I have library connections too. So I thought I'd definitely mention them. But it's a mystery that has to be solved. There are secrets that have to be discovered. There's a reason that Frankie is running from her husband, because he is abusive, but is he coming after her or is he not coming after her? And her aunt from 1928 is going back home for the first time in 40 years. And why is she doing that? What happened in her life in the last 40 years that made her make this decision? It was time to go back. And then we learn what happened in 1928 as well. So I think I've had my 2 minutes. I hope I haven't gone a little bit too long, but I hope you read the book and are interested in this story. I think it's going to surprise and entertain and pull on your heartstrings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Always enjoy hearing from you, and I am looking forward to you doing some more events for us on social media when the new book comes out. And really appreciate your time today. And now, without further ado, I will turn it over to New York Times bestselling author Kat Martin, who will talk about the second book in her new series, which is also packed with page-turning suspense.
I like to write brothers, and so I decided to do a new series with 3 new brothers, and I started with The Last Good Night, which was out just about, not even, I guess about 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, not quite a month. Anyway, so this book, I wanted to do something. I'm just becoming a half-time Arizona resident, so that started me thinking about setting up one of the 3 books about the brothers in Arizona. So And I always wanted to write, a treasure hunt story, a treasure, going after buried treasure or something. And so this is my book. I consider it my Raiders of the Lost Ark of my many books. This is my Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's really it's very fast paced. And of course they encounter all sorts of obstacles. But the way I started it, I wanted him to, the heroine in the book inherits a treasure map from her grandfather, who was a renowned treasure hunter. So she believes it's true because he was very well respected, that if he went after a treasure, he found it. And so she has to have help. Obviously, she doesn't know that much about it, hunting. So she goes to a world-renowned explorer named Gage Logan, and he's the second brother in the series. And he doesn't believe in it. You know, I mean, there's a million of these people think they're going to find a treasure from an old treasure map. But eventually, she ends up showing him a chunk of gold that was with the map, and he knew enough history of the area that he thought it was possible. So as I was researching, I did of course research a lot of different treasures, the world-renowned treasures to hunt, because I like to base my books on as much truth as I can. So we went after the Lost Dutchman mine in Arizona, which is world-renowned as an never been found treasure, one of the many treasures there are, but one of the biggest ones. And so in order to do it, I decided to it's in the Superstition Mountains, which is about 40 miles east of, it's 40 miles east of Phoenix. So I had seen pictures of this place, but it was so unusual. And I was going to set them going into the Superstitions, which has these deadly legends about how many 250 people have died trying to find this lost treasure over the last 150 or 60 years. So I wanted to see this place. Well, you can't really get into it. But it's the most profound. I mean, when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, this is really cool. But it's just this huge mountain in the middle of the desert. And it's just so forbidding looking that you know that it just looks like, oh my God, would you really want to go in there? So we went around the edges. We went in as far as we could to see it without, you have to go in on foot or horseback. It's totally, you can't take nothing, no machinery. You can't drive cars or do anything like that. So that's how it sort of started. And then and the hero and the heroine are both there. He has a problem in his past that keeps them really from it, even though they're very good together. He's got problems in his past that he has to overcome in order. And of course I write romance. So that's really it's a real third plot of the story. I always have multiple plot lines going. This one, we don't find the treasure, I'll tell you up front, in the Superstitions. We have to keep looking. So that's part of the storyline. Anyway, I loved writing this book because I think it's because I wouldn't have minded going on an adventure like this. I mean, in my younger years, obviously now you can't go in the summer. It's 125 degrees, which is why it's killed a lot of people in the Superstition. They don't go in at the right time of the year and that kind of thing. You have to really plan these kind of trips, and that's part of what the storyline's about. But there's so many people after the treasure that they have problems right from the very beginning. People coming after the map, people coming after her because they think she knows where it is. Once it leaks out that they're really on this thing, he's a famous enough guy that that poses a problem in itself, because he usually is successful in what he undertakes also. So it's got the one nice thing about it is which I'm not going to tell you, because then I'll tell you the whole plot, so I better not do that. Anyway, there's a lot of heart in this because of the girl's feelings, Abigail Holland's feelings toward the grandfather that left her the map, and this feeling that she must find this in order to not let him down. He's died within the last several months. They don't know where he died even. They know he was out of the country on one of his trips looking for this. So it's got a lot of heart, I think, because of her feelings for him and her determination to make this happen, not just for the money, really. It's more about his reputation, the grandfather that she loves so much. And I don't know, I really enjoyed writing. I loved it. I loved the adventure of it. And I hope you will too.
Thank you, Kat. That was great. Really exciting to have kind of this new sort of story with the treasure hunt. Also disappointed you did not personally find the treasure during your research, because that really would have made a great side piece.
Great promo. For this year.
But we'll have to try again.
And I love the cover. This is the first cover was beautiful. This one's is really neat. I was there in the spring, not the winter like the treasure map is or the cover is, but it's pretty intimidating there. That's for sure, which that picture really is. So.
Thanks so much. And this will be out just in time for next summer, and it will be the perfect beach read for suspense fans. And now we'll turn it over to Diane McPhail with her second novel of historical fiction, The Seamstress of New Orleans, which also has one of my favorite covers of the entirety of next year so far. I want this dress. I don't know where I will wear it, but I just need to have it.
Thank you. Yes, I am so thrilled with this cover. And it really does capture so much of what this book is about. I love New Orleans. I love Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is a sort of icon of American culture. I had an apartment in New Orleans for a couple of years after Katrina. I was there with a friend. We were very busy helping with the rehabilitation and rebuilding of the damage that was done. And my friend there, it was the Queen of Iris, which is an all-female crew whose roots go back to 1917. And so while I was there, I was fortunate enough to ride on her float in the Mardi Gras parade and take part in the balls with some other friends. So I had this whole Mardi Gras experience. And in all of that, I discovered that the first all-female crew went back to 1896 and was associated with leap year, where women could turn the tables on men. And so women could plan the dances, they could ask for the dates. One woman even asked a man to marry her. And so that first ball was in 1896 as a leap year. The 1900, which brought in a whole new century, innovation, invention, all this new energy, was not technically a leap year because it's not divided by the right numbers, which defy me because my son is the mathematician, not I. But the women just said, well, it's 4 years later. We're going to have a ball anyway. It's going to be a leap year. And so their second ball was in 1900. The book revolves around that ball. There is they're dual protagonists, two women, and a dual timeline for them until they come together. So it was an experiment in a different kind of structure for me. The two protagonists, one is Constance, who is a young widow on the lower level of the upper class of New Orleans. Her husband has suffered a violent death, and at a certain point, she comes under suspicion for his death. But at the same time, she is being horribly threatened by the organized crime of Storyville, which was an area of New Orleans that was legitimized prostitution and gambling for a few years. And she's under the threat of the Black Hand. Alice is a young woman who grew up on the plains and whose mother gave her all these immensely delicate and beautiful skills as a seamstress and embroidery and beading, because she wanted her to have a better life than she could have out on these almost deserted plains. And so she encouraged her to go to Chicago. She goes to Chicago. She meets a man who's very courteous, handsome, almost a perfect husband. She is pregnant and he disappears. She's abandoned. And it's the freezing, icy treacheries of a Chicago winter, and she decides to go south. She gets on the train and arrives in New Orleans. And by a mutual interest in the many orphanages in New Orleans because of rampant yellow fever, these two women get connected. And it's in the process of Alice creating this dress for Constance, by which she will be appropriately dressed, but at the same time be completely disguised. So you have this process of cooperation and creativity and working with symbolism that is just a sort of incredible process. And they're bonding through this, from one working for the other to Alice moving in and sort of becoming a deep friend until she has this baby. And I hope I did say she was pregnant when she was abandoned. To the point that they become like sisters. So many of you talked about sisters and what has divided them or kept them apart. This is a process of two women coming together in chosen family. And at the same time with this outside threat against them, and with also an unexpected and deeply shocking secret that neither of them has any idea about, that will test the bonds of this sisterhood. And like several others of you, I grew up in the library. My aunt, who was my mother, was a librarian, and from the time I was 3 years old and could walk across the bridge, she took me to the library. I have spent my life in libraries, haunting them. And I hope that readers will be lined up in queues, haunting your libraries in search of this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. I really appreciated you taking the time today to walk us through some of the history of your book. We have a lot of really exciting historical fiction upcoming in the first half of 2022. And I'm really glad that you've all come to share some of that background that we wouldn't otherwise have. Now I'm going to turn it over to the author of Manifesting Justice to talk us through what I think is one of the most important nonfiction books we will be publishing next year. Without further ado, I will turn it over.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Melina Beatty, and I have loved hearing about all of these books. And I'm like, these are one of what I want to read in my free time. My book is very different. It is a nonfiction book, but I hope it is equally engaging and equally a good read to all of these others that we've heard about. And I am definitely a lover of librarians. I am also, my background is that I am a former federal prosecutor and an innocence litigator, which means that I represent people who are incarcerated, who are in prison, who are wrongfully convicted. So that's my work, my background. I'm also a queer woman, and Manifesting Justice is about women and queer people who are wrongfully convicted and tools for how we can free them. So the story part of the book is that it focuses on my client and her co-defendant, Lee and Tammy. And in a very tragic twist of fate, 3 women were leaving a drug rehab center in rural Mississippi, and one of them overdosed. So her friends, Lee and Tammy, called 911. An ambulance took their friend to the hospital. But at the hospital, a well-known dentist was called in, and he found not just an overdose, but bite marks that would indicate an assault. And the only people in their eyes who could have bitten this woman were her two lesbian friends, Lee and Tammy. So I wrote this book because it was finally time to share these stories. And that's Lee and Tammy's stories. That's other incarcerated women and queer individuals. But the book begins really 20 years ago with my own journey as a rape victim advocate and as a prosecutor of domestic violence and sexual assault. So as a prosecutor, I thought that incarceration and prison were the way to stop cycles of violence. And I was a carceral feminist, and I no longer am. So I talk about that. The book brings together questions of whether we actually provide justice to victims, how we criminalize women and queer people, and particularly women of color, and thinking about what role can restorative justice play. Because the truth is that many people who we identify as criminals and we prosecute are wrongfully convicted. There's millions of people incarcerated in the US, and many of them are over-sentenced, they're overcharged, pressured into bad plea deals, and a disproportionate number of women of color and queer individuals are convicted due to racism, prejudice, coerced confessions, and false identifications. So in Manifesting Justice, I talk about how wrongful convictions are more than just factual innocence, and how can we indeed manifest justice, free more people, challenge convictions and sentences that are unjust and wrongful. So I know that's heavy, but I hope it is interesting to people. And the book includes a checklist of changes and things that we can do in the back. So I hope you'll pick it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that this is certainly an extremely important book that everyone should read. And I'm really proud to be publishing it and looking forward to sharing it as we get closer to the publication date. And now we have Matt Kane with The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle. And he is coming to us from the UK, actually. So that's really exciting that he was able to join us across the Atlantic to talk about his fiction novel today. So I will turn it over to him.
Yes, thank you. Can I just say, actually, I love the sound of Valina's book, and I'm really looking forward to reading that. Clearly, this is the queer section of the event because you've got two of us, one after the other. I think that may have something to do with our books coming out just in time for Pride Month. And yes, I am speaking to you from London, England. You can probably see I've got very different lighting to everybody else over there in the States because it is dark and nighttime here. But I am thrilled to be speaking to you. I absolutely love America. It's one of my the biggest loves of my life. So it's a real thrill to have a book published there for the first time. And as I say, I'm in London, but the book is actually set in the north of England, the working class north, which is where I'm from. It's called The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle, and it tells the story of a shy, lonely, and secretly gay postman who has a series of crises that prompt him to turn his life around. He wants to be happy. And to do this, he knows that he needs to delve back into his past, confront an unresolved trauma, and track down his lost love, the love of his life, after nearly 50 years. You're not told at the beginning of the novel how they were torn apart, but you know they were torn apart in terrible circumstances, and through a series of flashbacks, this is revealed. I'm not going to tell you whether or not Albert finds the lost love of his life, but I will say that along the way, He learns to love his true self. He engages with his community. He makes some unexpected friendships with people he thought were very different, but realizes are actually quite similar. And it's, in case you haven't guessed, a very uplifting book. And after the horrible few years we've all had with COVID, whichever side of the Atlantic that we're on, I really hope the book inspires readers to make the most out of life. If they have any unresolved dreams and ambitions, or any rifts that they need to seek reconciliation for, I just hope it makes people realize that now's the time to pursue these dreams. The tagline for the book here in the UK, where it's done really well, has been, "It's never too late to start your life's big adventure." On a more personal note, one of the things that inspired me to write the book was the joy that I felt at seeing gay men like me being embraced by society. I do think that often we point out inequalities that still exist, and that's very right and very important, but I do think we should also celebrate all the progress that has been made. And I think you'd be hard pushed to find any other minority community in the UK or the US that was as hated, feared and vilified as gay men were 50 years ago, and is now as widely accepted and loved, almost held up as a badge of honor to have a gay friend for a lot of people. So I wanted to write a book that would celebrate this. I really hope that The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle makes its readers feel good about themselves, but also feel proud of the role that they've played, however big or however small, in making the world a better place for people like me, bringing about this huge social change that I have to say, when I was growing up, I could never have predicted. And another thing, I'm only going to mention this because I noticed it's mentioned in the notes. Another thing that inspired me to write the book was finding love, finally, at the age of 44, with a man who, for his own personal reasons, had been in the closet for most of his life. He only came out the year before he met me, which is why I dedicate the book to him and I call him my very own Albert Entwistle. But also before that, I'd been single for a long time. I'd been lonely too. So I took Harry's situation, I channeled all my own feelings into the book, together with all the joy I felt at finally finding the love of my life. And I'm going to end on an upbeat note by saying that we are getting married here in London in 5 weeks' time, which is very exciting, also very nerve-wracking. But for those of you who can't be there, I really hope you enjoy the book when it's published by Kensington next May.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I myself know how stressful that is. I just passed my 10th wedding anniversary. Sadly, we did not get to renew our vows. Thank you, pandemic and 6-week-old baby. But I'm very excited for you. I just finished reading this book last week. It's a beautiful story. I hope everybody picks it up. There was definitely history in there that I didn't know about. And I think it's, again, something important that people should read so that, they can understand the history. And our final author presenter is none other than the legendary historical romance author Sabrina Jeffries with a brand new series, the Designing Debutantes Regency Romances.
So do I guess it's my turn then.
You dive right in there.
Okay. First, I want to make an apology. I had not intended to do this sitting on a bed, but it was my last minute switch over from where I was supposed to be because I don't have a good internet access. So this is supposedly the best place in the whole house. we'll see. So I would like to say welcome to all the librarians. My husband is a retired librarian, so I know a little bit about that. And he has been known to cheat the library rules to get me books from interlibrary loan. He used to, this was way before you could get anything on the internet. So he told me one day that I was cut off, that I had had my limit of 30 books through interlibrary loan. And he said, but I'll just start doing them on my card. So he's a good writer husband to have. This book is about a group of sisters, the Harper sisters. Their parents did something so outrageous and scandalous. They got a divorce, which is not common in the Regency, and requires going through 3 trials and all of this. So the daughters were in the midst of having their various come outs when their mother decided to run off with another guy. I had done a lot of research on the divorces that did happen during the period, and it was interesting to see how it affected the families, not the immediate people, but the children. And a lot of those women I noticed, some of them married, but it was a long time after the scandal, and some of them never married. So these 3 decide that, since they are considered, tainted by the brush of their parents, they don't get to go to very many balls and whatever. And a chance encounter with someone who wants their help, as she hears them talk about, how they would do the ball if they could, ask them to do that for her, and says she'll pay them. And they are intrigued by the idea. It gives them something better than becoming governesses or paid companions, which are about the only things ladies could do at that time if they didn't marry. And so that's how they begin their event. Of course, they don't call themselves event planners because the word didn't exist at the time. But I get around that a little bit, and the name of their business is Elegant Occasions. And so the book starts with the prologue about how they begin this business, and then it jumps to the established business, and a duke comes in to ask for their help with his sister. Now, this particular duke did not expect to ever inherit. He was like 6th in line or something, and didn't follow that sort of thing at all. And all of a sudden is catapulted to the dukedom by a series of deaths and people who didn't have heirs and that sort of thing. So he's
Looks like we're losing you a little bit there. Oh, looks like we might have Sabrina. Looks like she's frozen. Sorry, everyone.
Oh.
I'm gonna go ahead and finish talking about a Duke for. Oh, okay, there you are. You're back. No, you're gone again. I'm going to go ahead and finish talking about A Duke for Diana. As I mentioned, the first in the Designing Debutantes series. Sabrina is, of course, a legend.
Alex, am I back?
You are back.
Oh, okay. So the Duke is a civil engineer, and he's used to building bridges and designing various kinds of projects. And suddenly he is thrust into a world he never wanted to enter. His father had married far beneath himself and had married an ironmaster's daughter. And so his father kind of left that world. He was disinherited by his family. He had previously been a Viscount's son, but now he's done the unthinkable and married some nobody. And so the hero, who is not used to all of this, the Duke of Grenwood, is not exactly predisposed to like anybody from that world, but he has reasons that he wants to make sure that his sister is taken care of. And so he clashes with the woman of the group who's in charge of the fashion. And so he really does not impress her, and she does not impress him. It's one of those, you make a snap judgment about people, and then you slowly discover that they're not what you think they are, and that you have more in common with that person than you expected. So it's a new series. It will include these three sisters. I don't think it'll go beyond 3 books, but who knows? I never know these things. So at present, I have finished and am just in production for the first one. And that's it from me. I think y'all have sat long enough, although all of the descriptions were so fascinating to me. I hope y'all were fascinated too.
Thank you again, and sorry for the technical hiccups. I know we've gone way over time, and I wouldn't have had it any other way because everyone has done such a fantastic job talking about their titles. I'm gonna, if we've gone too far over time and you need to go, I understand. I'm gonna talk through the last few books so that everybody can get a full picture of the list, and we're recording, so barring any hiccups with the recording, that will be available to watch later as well if you can't stay for right now. I have a few books left that I'm going to talk through, starting with Mark Cameron's Cold Snap. This is the new book in his Arliss Cutter series. Mark Cameron is a New York Times bestselling author. He also writes the Jericho Quinn series for us, and he writes the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan books, of which there was just one out yesterday. So he is certainly well known in the thriller genre. He's also a former U.S. Marshal, so he adds that authenticity to his stories. He just writes really exciting, really page-turning, really well-done thrillers that keep his fans coming back again and again. The Arliss Cutter series is one that we've been publishing once a year for the past several years, and the fan base has really grown for this. And in this new one, we can definitely promise another really breakneck pace plot that readers will love. And then we have The Vanishing Type by Ellery Adams. This is the new book in her Secret Book and Scone Society series. These are cozy mysteries with a strong women's fiction crossover. Ellery's a New York Times bestseller. She is really big in the mystery genre. She has a huge fan base that keep coming back for her books. She writes this series, which is first out in hardcover every year. And then she also recently wrote Murder in the Locked Library in her mass market original series. She's an author that we're really excited about, and she does a lot of events. We have a lot of marketing and publicity planned around her books. And this series in particular is one that fans have really gravitated towards because it does have such a big story in that you have the mystery, you have the women's fiction, you have a bookstore. So there's something there for bibliophiles of all kinds. And totally different kind of historical World War II nonfiction with Gangsters versus Nazis. This is written by Michael Benson, who's an award-winning journalist, and he's written several books for us. This is the first one centered around World War II. There are a lot of people out there who read World War II nonfiction. They've never read this story before. Really pits like the gangsters are the good guys in this book, and they would not normally be considered the good guys, but when you have a rising tide of Nazism, they were there to really stamp it out as it was happening in the United States in the lead up to World War II. And it's untold history for World War II buffs, but also it's just the kind of story. When we first heard about this book, I just thought, this is Quentin Tarantino, but real life. So it is a different kind of book. It's a page-turning story, something you haven't heard before, very little known history. So it's not just for World War II buffs, but it's for anyone who is looking for a different kind of book that really gives you a different side to a story that you thought you might have already known. And then Jody Thomas, who we were lucky enough to have present in our last presentation in partnership with Overdrive. The next book in her Honey Creek series is Sunday at the Sunflower Inn. Dinner on Primrose Hill was just out this month. This will be the follow-up to that. These are just heartwarming, small town, women's fiction, contemporary romances. This is my favorite cover of all of them because who can resist a sunflower? They have that beautiful small town Texas setting where happy endings are kind of right around the bend and everyone comes together and supports one another. These are excellent stories for people who want to take an armchair travel trip to a small town where you can count on a happy ending. And Jody she's just a legend. She's fantastic. She has really done it all, and I'm so excited to be able to work with her on this series. And then we have the next trade paperback in our new trade paper program featuring the New York Times, USA Today, PW, everything best-selling Johnstone writing team. The first trade paper was Go West Young Man that came out in May of this year. Then just last month, we had To the River's End, which was even more successful than Go West Young Man. There is a huge audience out there for Westerns. As Jane mentioned earlier, Yellowstone is just the biggest thing going right now. And with this book, we move the setting to Texas, which is always a perennial favorite for Western readers. And that kind of trade paper format, non-series, big stories are really appealing to a wide audience. And we have big marketing campaigns aimed to broaden those Western readers to people who might not think that they would be a Western reader, but they're picking up these books and realizing that what they've been missing out on all this time. And then we have our final book of the presentation, The Diva Says Cheesecake by Krista Davis, another cozy mystery in our very broad best-selling cozy mystery program. Krista is again a New York Times bestseller. This is her biggest series, the Domestic Diva series. It has what cozy mysteries readers are looking for. You've got cake, you've got a cat, you've got a mystery, you've got a small town. You have it all with a Southern setting. It's just a lot of fun, really page turning, really hitting all the right buttons. If you are a mystery reader, you have to check out Krista Davis, who also does the Pen and Ink series featuring coloring books. So she's a really prolific author who is well known in the cozy mystery genre, and really excited to be able to share these books with you and the readers out there. So that was longer than I anticipated, so I'm sorry for taking up your afternoon. But I'm really glad that everyone was able to come today, and I really appreciate all the authors taking the time, and Essie and Jane for taking the time. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. If you would like to send me an email, I would really love to hear from you. I'd love to send you out ARCs, whether they be print or digital. We have them both. So please do reach out, and thank you again for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. This is great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I forgot I could talk.
Thank you. Right.
Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Alan. Bye, Donna.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.